The following is intended for those who've seen Scream 7. Hello, Screamers.
Welcome into this special edition of the ultimate variety podcast from hell. It is I, your host and gay savior, Ralph of the Dead. And by now, one of horror's most anticipated and most hated films, Scream 7, has been unleashed. And after seeing it twice, this episode, I will be breaking it down, I will be reviewing while having some thoughts, and I will be giving my entire film ranking of every film from the Scream franchise, as well as getting into the behind-the-scenes drama that has the fandom divided, unfortunately. Now, I will say that I am not a professional critic, nor have I ever claimed to be. I am just a gay boy with this horrifying dream who just loves slashers. Now, am I here to shit on this movie? No. Because overall, it's not an awful film like most critics are making it out to be. And also, as a fan of the genre and of creativity, I respect the work that goes into creating something. Now, before we begin, this is your final spoiler warning for Scream 7 because I am walking through this film in order, including the killer reveals. So if you have not seen it yet, pause here, then come back later. Now, let's get into it. Welcome to a world where darkness and mystery converge. Navigate the depths of horror and true crime and join a society beyond the ordinary, where buzzworthy topics, paranormal tales, and listener-submitted experiences blend into a realm of the unknown. You have crossed into a place where the unusual and the terrifying are just the beginning. My name is Ralph Anthony, and welcome to the Scream Society podcast. We have to start from the very beginning here. Scream 7 is the sequel to Scream 6 and the seventh entry in the franchise. Obviously, it was directed by Kevin Williamson, which is huge considering he wrote the original Scream. And that's kind of odd, right? Like having the literal creator directing the seventh installment, barely. Now, Scream 7 is basically a movie that was rebuilt from scratch. 5 and 6 leads weren't returning. Melissa Barrera was fired because of her pro-Palestine stance being deemed anti-Semitic. Jenna Ortega even exited, originally claiming scheduling conflicts, but has since admitted it being because of Barrera's firing. Allegedly. The directors of 5 and 6, Radio Silence, also left. Then they brought in Christopher Landon, but then he left after getting death threats from Melissa fans and boycotters. And if that wasn't a big enough headache then, well, the SAG strike came about, causing more delays. But as soon as Hollywood could continue the production process, they brought back Kevin Williamson to pen the new script, with rewrites reportedly costing $500,000. Holy fuck. So by that time, Neve Campbell confirmed her return as Sidney Prescott in March of 2024, posting to her Instagram page, and what followed was just crazy. She also received death threats and was deemed a genocide supporter and all of this, to which I think even to this day, she still has her comments turned off on every post. And that's when the movie wasn't just a sequel. It was this attempt at a course correction. And that context is important when discussing the tone, because this film feels like a retreat to Legacy because the Carpenter arc didn't work out. And that's not necessarily bad, but it is noticeable and very obvious if you ask me. And before some of y'all come for me, well, he's a fan, so he's gonna be biased. He hates Melissa. Actually, no. And do I think what happened to Melissa was good? Absolutely not. I don't support that decision. I don't support genocide, but I also don't worry about and waste my energy on decisions made by other people. I worry about what I can do to make a difference in any way. So as iconic as Scream fandom has been, I think it's also become a really divided and toxic fandom that I don't really want to engage with. I mean, we have that shit stain on this franchise and the legacy now. And I think lately it's felt like walking on eggshells, especially on social media. Like, feeling excited for this movie makes me this horrible person, makes you this horrible person. And these keyboard warriors know nothing about us, know nothing about what we've done, know nothing about what we've supported. And I think that's been my biggest issue here, because it doesn't make any sense. And the one thing I hate is feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. And don't even get me started on those creators who are dragging this movie daily, but then are asking their followers to send them Ghostface popcorn buckets and merch because they don't want to give their money to this film. Like, just shut up. So when conversations around boycotting Scream 7 come up, they usually start from a place of strong emotion, understandably. And that emotion is valid. Fans care deeply about this franchise. People care deeply about what Melissa stands for. And from the original Scream onward, the series has been about meta commentary. It's been about identity and who gets to survive. So when behind the scenes decisions upset people, it feels personal to them. But my issue with modern boycotting, and we're going to go there, my issue with modern boycotting is, and I've been saying this a lot, but it can sometimes be very unproductive. And I think in reaction to that, it does the actual opposite. Like, there's a difference between I'm choosing not to support this and you're wrong if you do. You're a MAGA loving Trump supporter who loves genocide. Go kill yourself, right? Like, the assumptions are wild. And a boycott aimed at one controversy can ripple outward and affect people who had nothing to do with that issue. Now, that doesn't mean people shouldn't protest. That's not what I'm saying here. But I do believe it complicates the moral equation. And look, horror already deals with gatekeeping when fans divide into real fans versus sellouts. It gets hostile really quickly, and I think that hostility makes newer fans less likely to engage and longtime fans less likely to share vulnerable or complex takes, and it just resorts to fighting. And ironically, a franchise that literally critiques toxic fandom has ended up becoming a case study in it, right? Now, again, none of this means boycotts are inherently wrong. I think they can be powerful tools when they're organized clearly and focused on specific outcomes. Now, going into Scream 7, I wanted to go in with blank eyes. I didn't want any biases because of my love for the franchise. No biases because of the Melissa Barrera damage. Just blank. And I do support both women. I supported Neve with the pay dispute, and I support Melissa in the firing. And I don't believe anyone should ever be silenced by any entertainment entity. But again, coming for the people who end up watching this movie is not productive. And if we really want to go there, we need to be boycotting everything then, because all of these production companies and high entities are all fucked. And if you listen to this podcast on a regular basis, you know what I'm talking about. Now, with that said, I was already kind of weary / excited when the promotion for this film started to come out. It felt like they were just waving this idea of nostalgia and bringing back past characters to get booties and seats. Again, after the drama happened behind the scenes and they started announcing all of these iconic actors coming back to the franchise, it did feel a little off to me. It felt a little desperate. But again, I was pumped. Bringing back Kevin Williamson, who wrote the original, and bringing him on to direct, it felt poetic, if that doesn't sound so dramatic. But also kind of like, why didn't this happen sooner? Then bringing Neve Campbell back, obviously, and then they started announcing Matthew Lillard, Scott Foley, David Arquette, all of these past characters who have died. I was kind of worried also in the direction that they were going to go, and unfortunately I was right about that, but more on that later. But looking back, Scream fans, it's been an emotionally exhausting last couple of years being a fan, hasn't it? Like, shit. And look, we could be seeing an 8th film sooner than later because the film is already breaking records with the highest grossing opening weekend of the franchise with $64.1 million. The highest grossing opening weekend of the franchise. Wild. But also, let's be real, it's the lowest rated on Rotten Tomatoes, meaning it has so many bad reviews. So with that said, I think it's time. Let's review Scream 7 after the break.
From the blood-soaked depths of late-night horror comes a collection so shocking, so scandalous, it'll make your wardrobe scream. Want my face on your chest? Or maybe you just want to rep the cult, the logo, the legend, the Scream Society? Don't just listen to the nightmare, wear it, rep it, live it. Get it now before it gets you. Head to scream-society.printify.me and rep Scream Society merch.
One of the biggest aspects from this franchise has been the opening scenes. Each film seems to always want to top the previous, and most people will always say that the original is untouched. Now, Scream 7 opens in Woodsboro at Stu Macher's house, immediately tying us back to the events of the original Scream and even Scream 5. And I think that location choice is deliberate here. Stu's house has been mythologized by fans for decades, especially by those who believe that he is alive. So in this film, we meet Scott and Madison, Stab franchise fans. Well, I think mostly Scott is the fan. They've rented the house for the night because it's been turned into a spooky true crime Airbnb experience. And much like Scream 6, 7 does have somewhat of a focus on the conversation about Stu Macher still being alive. And here we have Scott and Madison discussing that. And for me, this was a solid opening, but it did carry on a little too long. I mean, the Ghostface animatronic was cool, but I missed the slow buildup with Ghostface. The phone call conversation that we usually get with Roger L. Jackson with Ghostface on the phone. The phone call in this film is really short. There really isn't an extended chase scene. Instead, it just gets straight to it. I mean, Scott gets a knife through the head and we see his eyes roll back, which was pretty cool. Then Madison runs up the stairs. Ghostface chases her and they both fall off, but she grabs onto the chandelier and eventually falls onto Ghostface's knife after hanging from it. Then Ghostface lights her on fire and the rest of Stu Macher's house. And for me, I think that was pretty fucking awesome. But when you get to the end of the film, I just wish that someone with a bigger link to the past would have done this. When Ghostface sets the house on fire, I took it as a form of symbolism. Did anyone else? I think this was the franchise metaphorically burning down this theory or mythology of Stu's survival. Because again, that's been a conversation for years. And I think Scream 7 is telling us, we know what you've been saying, fuck off, he's dead. And then we get a badass title card that blends the original films with the modern version, and I think it's fucking sick. It was really fucking cool. Next, we cut to Pine Grove, Indiana, where Sidney Prescott, aka Sydney Evans, is living a quieter life. She is married to Mark Evans, portrayed by Joe McHale, and she runs a coffee house, the Little Latte. She has children, including her teenage daughter Tatum, and I'm glad that they addressed that Scream 5 moment when she was jogging with 2 infants. They're away, safe from danger, because they are with their grandmother, apparently. And this section is slower by design and definitely gave me first film vibes. Sydney's daughter Tatum, portrayed by Isabel May, even has a similar scene to the original where her boyfriend Ben climbs through her window. And I think the film is already trying the boyfriend red herring trope, which in my opinion is tired. Sydney ends up catching them in a very similar moment to when her dad from the original catches her and Billy. They even play the same Don't Fear the Reaper cover. Now I think the pacing allows us to see Sydney in stability, which then makes the inevitable intrusion more disruptive. Plus, naming her daughter Tatum is significant, I think. I think it shows that Sydney has not erased her past, but that she is carrying it with her. But in this softened form. Now, I take issue with a scene at the coffee shop. Sidney is handing out drinks like the final girl barista owner that she is, and hands a drink to a creepy guy named Carl. More on him later. But I take issue with Sidney and her neighbor Jessica, played by Anna Camp. It gave me TV show vibes, you guys. It gave me Hallmark movie. And the dialogue was weird. It didn't feel real. And I'm sure Anna Camp is great, but for me in this film, she was the weakest performance here. I wasn't believing what she was saying, and that will resurface again every time she's on screen and even at the end. Now, Jessica, the neighbor's son Lucas, was an okay character and another red herring to the story because he was obsessed with Sidney and the stab movies as well as true crime, and he even wanted to be the next true crime podcast host, me. But that was it. And that's another issue I had here with Sidney's daughter's boyfriend and high school friends. They didn't give them enough time to breathe, enough time for us to really get to know these friends. So I didn't really care when they started killing them off. I think with Scream films, usually the locations play a big part. The locations are essentially like their own character with their own vibes, their own personality. And this one it just felt very small. So when Ghostface finally calls Sidney and requests a video chat, the tone shifts really quickly here. Seeing an aged, scarred Stu Macher on screen, portrayed once again by Matthew Lillard, is exciting. It was jarring. The makeup and performance suggests that he survived, but just something felt slightly off, obviously, before I even knew what was happening. Also, I do have to say, I love how they used similar makeup to the ones that fans have faked years ago with all the scars and like him looking really messed up. I do have to say that Matthew Lillard was hilarious and made me laugh out loud every time he was on screen. So Sidney's on the phone with Stu, allegedly, and during the call, Stu claims he is outside the theater where Tatum is rehearsing with her friends. Hannah is the lead in this play that they're practicing for. I believe she's playing like a fairy and is being lifted with wires. Tatum is playing a dog, and the costume is giving furry community, just saying. So when they break, Tatum and Ben go to the back. Then Ben disappears, and we can see Ghostface stalking in the back. Sidney rushes there with the police, and Ghostface kills two of Tatum's classmates, Hannah and Aaron, before running away. And I thought Hannah, who is portrayed by McKenna Grace, would have had more time on screen. She did sing the Ice Nine Kills song that's in the soundtrack, and I loved how creative they tried to get with her death. As I said, she was on wires, so she was still rehearsing when everyone took a break, and the killer takes control and is swinging her back and forth and goes down to the stage with her and starts cutting her and eventually guts her, leaving us with a great shot of her hanging with her insides hanging out. I think this scene is structured to feel like a classic Scream public attack, right? Like creating chaos in this space and reinforcing the idea that Ghostface is always watching and that he's everywhere. However, what makes this one different is Sidney's stress. Like, she's no longer this Sarah Connor badass trying to just survive. She is trying to prevent her daughter from becoming the next final girl, basically. And I think that the attack establishes that it's not Sidney that's the main target, it's her daughter Tatum. From this scene on, we get a pretty action-packed section of the film, which, side note, I want to give a huge kudos to Joe McHale as Sidney's husband Mark, because for me, he delivered. He wasn't overly corny. He was there to be the sheriff that was protecting his family. Shout out to him. And he had some of the best fighting choreography with him and the killer. So later that night, Ghostface emerges from Sidney's attic and holds Tatum at knife point. This is one of the most tense sequences because it invades Sidney's safe space, obviously. Here, they find the right moment and Tatum runs while her father Mark kicks the fuck out of Ghostface and he goes flying. Mark then continues to try to take control of the situation, but is pushed down the stairs and knocked unconscious. Sidney then takes Tatum into this safe room that she has built into her, I believe it's her closet. And the safe room concept is interesting to me because it obviously suggests that Sidney has never fully felt safe. She's built this protection into her home. And speaking of building, the movie also shows construction being done on her home, which also becomes a relevant set piece later. Anyway, Sidney hits Ghostface with the pipe, or was it like a metal bat? I'm not sure. And locks herself and Tatum in the safe room. And then we get the wall scene from the trailer, which was a cool scene. It added some suspense. Sidney ends up bending the killer's knife with her pole, and then the killer grabs a fireplace poker and stabs her in the arm through the wall. So when Sidney and Tatum get out through the alternate exit to escape, Ghostface chases them outside, but Mark is awake by now and has a fight on the lawn with the killer. This fight then gets the killer pushed into the street, and in a moment that I think balances horror with the franchise's absurdity and is by far the best moment from this movie, we get Gale Weathers, Courtney Cox, who hits and runs Ghostface over with her car. It is so dramatic, and it is slightly campy and just very on brand for Gale. And they've made Gale a super high-end version of herself here, which I fucking loved. And this movie also brings back the twins, who I actually love. I don't really get the Mindy and Chad hate, but to each their own. And for me, I think they brought this fun and light comedic energy that I think that I needed. I think Jasmine Savoy Brown is great, and Mason Gooding is so hot. Now here they are with Gale, almost, I think they were like kind of like interns for her, like Chad is a cameraman, and I forgot what Mindy did, but I know she wants to report at some point. And then a franchise first, and what I think was an attempt to switch things up, we get a mid-film unmasking. Carl Gibbs, who was an escaped mental patient, and the guy I mentioned earlier that Sidney gave a coffee to. So at first glance, and in my movie theater when this first happened on first watch, everyone was like, who's that? But if you're a seasoned Scream viewer, like, you know that it wasn't that simple. There was still more to the story. So Sidney and Gale end up visiting the institution, and they meet this supervisor named Marco. He reveals that a John Doe resembling Stu Macher had recently been released and had no memory of his past, and that he was friends with Carl, the killer reveal from earlier. And this explanation really plants doubt. I think it suggests that Stu might actually be alive, but kind of altered. And I was almost fooled, because when I first saw Stu on screen, I was like, they're doing the AI shit. And then this scene came out and I'm like, wait, maybe they're not? Because this is where the film begins layering misdirection more heavily. Marco appears to be helpful and informative, which is supposed to make him less suspicious on first viewing. However, the technology references and his knowledge of the facility obviously foreshadow his later reveal, and I clocked him immediately. Then we cut back to the house. Mindy suggests gathering Tatum's friends in one place, since Ghostface's motive is always personal. It's always someone you know, right? Tatum, her boyfriend Ben, and her friend Chloe, played by Celeste O'Connor, who was great here. I really liked Chloe. And Lucas meet at the tavern/pizza shop owned by Chloe's parents. Meanwhile, Mark is attacked at home. Remember when I said that the construction zone area at Sidney's home would play a part here? This is one of them. The killer attacks him while he's checking out a strange noise. His stabbing is pretty vicious, and I actually thought he died here. Plus, the film tells you that there are more Ghostface killers. Now, back at the tavern, Tatum and Ben end up leaving after Tatum mentions that she wants to be with her mom after Gale and Sidney go live in an attempt to get the killer to call her while on television. Another great scene here between the two legends, and I felt really sad for Gale. Her body is obviously affected by the attack from Scream 6, and I don't know, I just felt really bad for her character. Back to Tatum and Ben. While in Ben's car, suspicion begins to build around him when Tatum finds his laptop in his car running an AI deepfake test that morphs his face into Stu's. And this part was dumb for me. I'm sorry. And this is one of my biggest issues with the movie, like I said, and even the promotion. AI, really? Anyway, Tatum knocks Ben out with his laptop and runs away in an empty downtown because the city has curfew. There is a really cool scene that mirrors the original's curfew scene while Red Right Hand is playing. Like, it's showing all the downtown shops locking up early and people rushing home, and I thought that was a very cool scene with this downtown. So cut back to the tavern. Mindy gives a less obnoxious speech about the rules this time. Then Ghostface attacks again, killing Chloe and Lucas and injuring the Meeks twins. Chloe's death was okay. She gets a shard of glass in her neck after being dragged across the counter. And as for Lucas, he is stabbed and lifted and speared through the head on a beer draft nozzle thingy, which looked great until we wanted to show CGI beer and blood come out of his mouth. Like, seeing Ghostface put him on, it was a great practical effect until it wasn't. Now, the chase through the streets, it feels like classic Scream chaos. Ben eventually finds Tatum, only to be killed moments later, and I think his death just reinforces that the boyfriend trope is dead here. But I didn't feel anything. I don't know, guys. Like, I love this franchise so much, and I liked the film, but I feel like there were just so many missed opportunities. Like, why didn't we ever go anywhere with Tatum finding the AI on his laptop? Like, there could have been more there. So Tatum flees to Sidney's coffee house. Sidney instructs her over the phone to retrieve a gun from the coffee safe because Sidney left the news station but didn't have a car, so she's running all over the town and she's not going to make it to the coffee shop. So Sidney then guides Tatum to the coffee shop while looking at the cameras and being on FaceTime. And she also guides Tatum where to shoot the killer through a wall. Tatum shoots Ghostface from behind a wall, which is a really cool moment, but she has to leave the office that she's locked in to shoot Ghostface in the head. But obviously that doesn't happen. And then the film escalates by revealing a second Ghostface at the front door before Tatum runs out. And I thought it was a really cool slow motion shot. It was badass. It was like, oh, here's another Ghostface. And yeah, it was really cool. Anyway, they grab her and take her back to Sidney's house and tie her up like Steve from the first movie's opening. And this is where the structure shifts into final act territory. Disappointing. Stu calls Sidney and gets her to run home. Then the TVs in her house go on and show Stu digitally morph into past killers, including Nancy Loomis, Roman Bridger. Scott Foley is such a daddy. He's so fucking beautiful, let me just say. We also get an AI Dewey Riley, and the Dewey morph is particularly weird for me. Like, just the whole AI concept, again, was unnecessary. The deep fake technology reveal reframes everything. Marco, the guy that we met at the psych ward, is revealed to be one of the killers and admits that he crafted the illusion of Stu using his IT background. The film transitions from slasher mystery to techno-psychological thriller, I guess, and this reveal did nothing for me. I had clocked it, and these characters didn't have an impact on me. With the AI shit, like, I think this concept is, it could have been stronger, but I think here it was underexplored, and like, I see the horror of identity manipulation, but we do not spend enough time like unpacking the implications here. The second Ghostface unmasks as Jessica, Sidney's neighbor. Her motive is, I don't even remember. It's I think it's like an ideological motive rather than a vengeful one. Like, I think she believes trauma forged Sidney's strength, and she just like wants to recreate that with Sidney's daughter Tatum. I don't know about that. Her confession about killing her own son because she saw her abusive husband in him adds like a somewhat unsettling layer, and I think it really does show the character's instability and really showcases her unbelievable acting. Now, the final fight between Sidney and Jessica, I do admit, was fun. I love a good girl fight, and Sidney fucks her up. Then when Tatum joins in and ultimately helps kill Jessica, the film symbolically passes survival knowledge to the next generation. And the repeated gunshots to Jessica's head are excessive, but I think that was a really fun and brutal scene. Now, wrapping up the film, Sidney thanks Gail and explains Tatum's namesake. The tone really softens, obviously. That's what usually happens at the end of a Scream film. Then we get Mindy's impromptu news report, which reintroduces like meta commentary. And I think that really reminds us that Scream is always aware of itself. And the ending feels conclusive, but I don't think this is the final one, like it was mentioning in all of the trailers. I hope that it leaves room for continuation, especially with the box office numbers that it did. This one really positioned Tatum as the potential future lead. All right, so my final reflection. Are we ready? So scene by scene, Scream 7 is ambitious. I do give it that. It tackles legacy obsession, digital identity manipulation, generational trauma, and franchise self-awareness. However, the connective tissue here between those themes somewhat feels rushed. The film has strong ideas, but I don't think it always allowed them to breathe. Still, I think the film is very layered. It is messy, but I think it also is thoughtful. And perhaps that messiness reflects the state of the franchise itself right now. Now, as for Sidney and all of that, I am so happy that they did not give her the Halloween 2018 Laurie treatment. There are moments where Ghostface is almost ghost-like, and you get the scenes where you can see him in the background, like dimly lit, and then it like fades away. Like, think of the original Halloween, and I know I keep going back to Halloween, but the original Halloween with Michael Myers, when he's behind Jamie Lee Curtis, and you just see the whiteness of his mask appear behind her, and then it fades away. And that's kind of what they did here, and it was fucking awesome. Another good thing here is Neve Campbell's acting. I think we really see her character in this role that we've never really seen her in since the original. She was becoming this badass in Scream 2, already a badass in 3. In 4, she's untouchable. And then in 5, she is this unstoppable badass who doesn't give a fuck what the killer has to say on the phone. So it was nice to kind of go back to that very vulnerable first film, Sidney. I also really love Tatum. I think she was a solid choice for Sidney's daughter, and the chemistry was great there. Now, do I think that she could continue to carry this franchise? Absolutely. Again, Joe McHale was fucking awesome. Gale Weathers was amazing. The twins, they don't bother me. And the kills were creative. I do appreciate that. But as for the bad, like I said, the kills, I appreciated Kevin's approach to make the kills more creative because the franchise has never really had super creative kills. The scene in the theater was great. Then, like I mentioned, I really loved the head impaling with the beer dispenser. But again, as creative as they were, it did feel kind of cartoonish, and they really stretched the reality with this film. Again, the AI, I really wish we would have gone a different route, but it's there. It is what it is at this point. And finally, the killer reveal. That was the worst part of this entire movie, and I think that's what a lot of people are upset about. I think they could have had a stronger reveal. Now, this film is out. It's been out. I'm filming this the Sunday of release weekend. But the question stands, do I believe now that there is a bad Scream film? And my answer is still going to be no. We might have a few silly ones in the bunch, but I still think that they are consistent. But maybe consistency could be the problem, because what I would love to see from the franchise in the future is just more creativity and risk-taking and truly changing the formula up where audiences will be so mind-blown. Otherwise, I think the films will continue to prove the naysayers right if they continue down this path. And finally, if I'm ranking the films, it would have to be from my favorite to least favorite, but even least favorites are loved. Scream 4, Scream 2, Scream 1, Scream 6, Scream 7, Scream 5, and Scream 3. So again, there aren't any bad films. I'm just ranking them from my favorite to least favorite. And again, those numbers are always moving. But in closing, huge kudos to Kevin Williamson and Neve Campbell for adding another film to a franchise that hasn't jumped the shark quite yet. I mean, at least it doesn't have time travel yet. And even if you disregard my gripes and go into it just expecting to have fun, I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. So yeah, Scream 7. Go see it if you want. If you don't see it. Go see something else. But until next episode, I will scare you all on the next one. Thank you for tuning into the Scream Society podcast, hosted, written, produced, and edited by yours truly, Ralph Anthony. Help the society grow by subscribing on your favorite platform and leave a rating and review. I always strive for 5s. Have a horror or paranormal experience? Want me to answer your questions on the show? Submit to beacons.ai/The Scream Society. Connect with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Scream Society Podcast. And until next time, I'll scare you on the next episode.